So my mission today is to change the way that you think about clothes. Think about what you're wearing right now. Where did it come from? Where was it made? When I say made, you probably think, where was it stitched? But where did it come from before that? Is it cotton that came from a farm? Wool that came from a sheep? Was it petroleum? Did it come from a recycled plastic bottle? Our clothes come from everywhere. And I'm going to spare you this afternoon. I was going to ask you to turn to the person next to you and look at the tag inside their neck and see where the product is made. But it's dark, so I'll spare you. But I can assure you it's made everywhere. Our clothes are made everywhere today. You know, at the beginning of the last century, most of our clothes were made in the United States. Then by the early 90s, with the passage of NAFTA and CAFTA, a lot of U.S. apparel manufacturing jobs moved to Latin America. Many of them moved to Asia. In 2005, when the multi-fiber arrangement, which was a quota system, ended, apparel manufacturing in countries like Nicaragua and Lesotho dried up overnight. And a lot of apparel manufacturing went to China. Now China's becoming too expensive, and it's moving to Bangladesh. I work with a factory in Liberia that's starting to get orders from big brands because they're duty-free under the Africa Growth and Opportunities Act. This dress that I'm wearing was made in Costa Rica of organic and fair trade cotton from Nicaragua, stitched in a factory in Costa Rica, also following fair trade standards. And sadly, I learned last week that that factory is going out of business, the latest casualty in a long fight to keep manufacturing in the Americas. The silver lining in that is that the company who makes the dress, actually, Maggie's Organics, just announced at a TEDx in Ann Arbor last week that they are going to set up a sewing cooperative in Detroit. So the average American buys 64 items of clothing a year and 7 pairs of shoes. Yeah. How many of those are fair and sustainable? 1. How many of them are made in the United States? 6. 5 years ago, I went to my first American factory. It was a sock factory at the foot of the Appalachian Mountains in eastern Tennessee, in a town called Nyota, where they used to have several hundred hosiery factories, and now they just have a few. And what struck me being in this factory and talking to the workers, some of them who have been there for 30 years, and worked their way up from sewing machine operator to supervisor to manager, is the feeling of being part of a family, of working there. 2 weeks ago, I was in India visiting best-in-class factories there. And the workers told me that exact same thing. They said it's like a family here. So what makes a good factory? Well, income and empowerment, obviously. Earning more, not always a living wage, but more than minimum. Having a voice in the workplace. But also having management that understands the value of investing in their workers, who see their workers as an asset, not a liability. A fantastic book came out recently called Profit at the Bottom of the Ladder, which talks about this very thing, that actually companies can be profitable investing in the least educated, least trained people in their workforce, people like sewing machine operators. And it profiles companies who have proven that this is possible. American Apparel is one of the companies that they profile. And for all the controversy around American Apparel's racy marketing, they have proven that it's possible to pay a living wage to American Apparel workers. How do they do it? Through bonuses for productivity. So they don't say, we're paying all our unskilled workers a living wage across the board, regardless of output or productivity. Instead, they say, we're going to give our workers the best training and opportunities for advancement so that they can achieve their highest income potential. Another company called Restore Clothing, that's based in New York City and manufacturing in New York, was just named by Apparel Magazine as a sustainability all-star. And they said they choose to manufacture in New York City because for every manufacturing job created, 1.7 jobs are created in other industries. But not every company understands the business value of investing in their workers. So that's where you come in. People are always asking me, what companies should I buy clothing from? What are good companies? What are bad companies? I think that's a little bit the wrong question to ask. The first question you should ask yourself is, what are your priorities? Is it most important to you that it be made in the US? Or is it most important to you that the people who made it got paid fairly and treated fairly regardless of where they live? What does it mean to be made in the USA? Our country of origin regulations say made in the USA means if substantial transformation happened here in the US. But what that means in practice is that you can have a pair of jeans that are labeled made in the USA that have cotton grown with forced child labor in Uzbekistan and yarn dyed in China. So you can have excellent factories in the US and excellent factories overseas. And you can have sweatshops, as Aurette said, in Madison Square Garden and in Shenzhen, China. The country of origin doesn't always tell you what the conditions were like in the manufacturing. Unfortunately, companies themselves don't always tell you what the factory conditions are like either. Companies like the ones that Aurette works with often post information on their websites about their factory working conditions. But who has the time to research every single company that they buy from? This is an example of Timberland's quarterly reporting on their factories. So you can see the little dots are everywhere, and the data doesn't exactly tell a clear story of what's happening in the factories. And of course, we never have this information where we need it most, which is at the point of purchase. So all those 4,000 companies that Aurette mentioned working with, not a single one of them is saying in their store or on their hang tag, this is what we're doing to invest in workers in our factories. This is what we're doing to improve working conditions. So why is it that we can't walk into a clothing store and see this information, but we can walk into grocery stores and make all kinds of choices about how our food is made? It's organic, it's free range, it's fair trade certified, it's local. Partly it's because we're not asking for it, but partly it's because companies are afraid. They've been campaigned against. Since the mid-90s, large apparel brands have been campaigned against for sourcing in sweatshops. And the victory of this campaigning is that they've said, we do take responsibility for the conditions in the factories where we source. But the downside of the campaigning has been... Hello? Uh-oh. Hello? 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 Okay. The downside of the campaigning has been that they've set up an elaborate industry to police their factories and try to prove they're not sweatshops. But it's an approach that actually doesn't help workers. It wasn't designed to help workers. So there is hope. Levi's announced in May, actually, the CEO of Levi's stood up a few miles from here and announced a new vision for their supply chain. They're tying it to the Millennium Development Goals, to eradicating extreme poverty, to empowering women, to promoting environmental sustainability. It's not clear yet how they'll do that. But definitely, they're going to need support from people like you to go into the places where you buy your clothes. Think about where you buy your clothes. And I want to challenge you, the next time that you go to buy a piece of clothing, look at where it's made. But not just where it's made, how it's made. Ask questions. See if you can find a fair and sustainable option. What I would like to see is in this decade, a fair and sustainable option in every clothing store in America. But all of us need to work together to make that happen. And we need to vote with our dollars and ask for fair and sustainable clothing. Thank you.